Again, to remind you, SiriusXM is free through the end of May. So come on over tonight. Listen to my show, 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, channel 127. The focus of my show, like every night, is defeating Donald Trump. We are 159 days away from the most important election of our lives, which I call Judgment Day. Judgment Day for our nation and our values. It is up to us. And my recommendation is stay angry. And every day Donald Trump makes it easier to stay angry. For example, today, we have over 100,000 Americans now dead from the coronavirus. We had 2.1 million more Americans file for unemployment in the last week, bringing it to over 40 million Americans unemployed, not knowing how they're going to pay bills. And what's Trump focused on? Fighting Twitter. But what we're going to focus on my show today is my hope that the media will focus less on the riots in Minneapolis and more on George Floyd and the history of racism by the Minneapolis police against the black community. This is not in a vacuum. None of this. There's a reason we've seen, you can call them riots, you can call them protests that became violent from the 1960s through today. And the common thread is police brutality against African Americans. You know, James Baldwin, a famous author in 1960, said, to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in rage almost all of the time. He saw what was going on in the 1960s. Martin Luther King said, riots do not develop out of thin air. And he added, a riot is the language of the unheard. It's also the language of the frustrated. It is the language of those who have no other resort, who have tried everything possible, from having more of their community, in this case black African Americans, on the police force, including the chief of police in Minneapolis is African American, to elected officials who are African American in Minneapolis, including the congresswoman there is Ilhan Omar, to the attorney general in Minnesota is Keith Ellison, who's African American. Still, things don't change. We had an African American president. Things don't change. And you go through the history from 1965, the riots in Watts, to Newark riots, to LA riots, to Ferguson, to Baltimore, to now, and all in between. And what's the common denominator? Police brutality against African Americans. And it's got to be addressed. And the focus to me is not on what happened in the looting or the rioting, as the media wants to call it last night. It's how did we get here? And why is it not being addressed? You know, we might have charges filed tonight. There's going to be a press conference in a short time. We'll cover that on my show, of course. But in the history of Minneapolis there, the African-American community is 20%. They've been unjustly pulled over, arrested, and imprisoned disproportionately. There's been a growing rift between the 20% of the community that is black and the white police force, with few exceptions, including the chief of police, for years and years and years. It's been bubbling up. Never talked about until this moment. Martin Luther King again said, riots do not develop out of thin air. It is the language of the unheard. It's time we have these difficult conversations. We have them together on my show, and I hope you'll join me tonight. Again, give me a call. Join the conversation tonight. Got two great guests in the second hour, both actors and activists. One is Rami Youssef, my friend, who's the Golden Globe winning actor from Rami, the series he created. The second season kicks off tomorrow on Hulu, and I hope you'll check it out. It's great stuff. And then actor Jeffrey Wright, who you know from Westworld and Angel in America and other. He's doing some great work in Brooklyn with raising money and organizing a campaign to help bring meals to first responders during the COVID-19 crisis. So we'll talk to them live and more. So again, tune in. SiriusXM is free from now to the end of the month. Go to SiriusXM.com. It says start streaming. Click on it. Come to my show, 6 to 9 p.m. tonight, Eastern Time, channel 127 Progress. Thanks for tuning in to the little preview of tonight's Dino Budala Show.